Namaskar. I'm Harpreet Kaur and I welcome you all to this special live and interactive online program of ours. This is our webinar series titled Listening to Learn, Yani Sune aur Seekhe. Today we are in 111th edition of this webinar series and you're watching us live on PMeVidya channels 9, 10, 11 and 12. We are also streaming live on our YouTube handle NCERT Official. Well, for this 111th edition, the topic that we have taken up is the Royal Indian Navy and India's transition to independence. Yani Royal Indian Navy और भारत की स्वतंत्रता. Of course, this talk is going to present a comprehensive view of the history of Royal Indian Navy, like its origin, development and much more. You can also participate in the session with your suggestions, feedback and your questions also. So please take down our phone number, which is 8800440559. Our email ID is dth.class12@ciet.nic.in. And on our YouTube handle NCERT Official, you can also send us your questions, suggestions and get in touch with us instantly. Let me remind you that participation certificates will be issued to those who will join us online on our YouTube handle. Now, before this session, we have already completed 110 sessions, 110 editions of this webinar series, which is presented by Department of Education and Science and Mathematics, NCERT. So, if you wish to watch our previous sessions and explore some amazing content, please log on to the link, which is ncert.nic.in/webinar_series.php. And now it's time for me to introduce everybody out there to man behind this initiative, who will not only introduce our special guest to you, but will also take this discussion forward with him. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Gagan Gupta from DESM NCERT. Sir, namaskar and very warm welcome.
नमस्ते हरप्रीत, नमस्ते दोस्तों। आज एक बार फिर से मैं आपके सामने हूँ। 111वां सत्र है। 4 बरस पहले हमने इस यात्रा को CSIR इंडिया और NHRC गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया के साथ मिलकर के शुरू किया। आज हम 111वें सत्र में हैं। हमने इस प्रोग्राम में विभिन्न विषयों पर बात की। हमने हेल्थ से जुड़े हुए विषयों पर बात की, हमने बैटरी से जुड़े हुए विषयों पर बात की, हमने स्पेस से जुड़े हुए विषयों पर बात की, हमने न्यूक्लियर प्रोग्राम से जुड़े हुए विषयों पर बात की, हमने अंटार्कटिका मिशन पर बात की, हमने यदा कदा हम साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी के विषयों से भी थोड़ा सा बाहर निकले हैं, हमने एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप पर भी बात की, हमने पोइट्री पर भी बात की। आपको याद होगा दोस्तों, जैसे मेरे साथी हरप्रीत ने अभी बताया कि आप हमारे पुराने सारे शो सेशंस आप हमारे ncert.nic.in के इवेंट सेक्शन में जाकर देख सकते हैं। साथियों, मैं आपको याद दिलाना चाहता हूं कि हमने इस प्रोग्राम में, इस सीरीज़ में समुद्र से जुड़े हुए बहुत सारे विषयों पर बात की। हमने अंटार्कटिका मिशन पर बात की, हमने पोलर मिशन पर बात की और आगे भी करेंगे, आगे भी करने वाले हैं। हमने भारतीय सेना से जुड़े हुए विषयों पर बात की। हमने आपको जहां दिल की सैर कराई थी, उसी तरह से हमने आपको फेफड़ों की सैर भी कराई थी और साथ में आपको पानी की कहानी भी बताई थी। साथ में आपको याद होगा, हमने सारे युद्ध शस्त्रों की कहानी भी बताई थी जब हमारे साथ एयर कमांडोर अश्विंदर सिंह बहल थे। साथ में 1971 में इंडियन नेवी की क्या भूमिका रही 71 वॉर में, हमारे साथ डॉक्टर श्रीकांत केसनूर इस सेशन में यहाँ स्टूडियो में थे, उन्होंने उसके बारे में बात की। हमने अभी हाल ही में ब्रह्मोस के ऊपर बात की, ब्रह्मोस मिसाइल्स के ऊपर बात की, ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के ऊपर बात की। आज उसी क्रम में हम एक और अपने सशस्त्र बलों के साथ बात करना चाहते हैं, लेकिन आज हम आपको इतिहास के झरोखे में ले जाएंगे। आज हम मेरे साथ हैं मेरे साथी एक यंग मैन Kalesh Mohanan, Commander Kalesh Mohanan, who heads the Naval History Division of Goa of Indian Navy at Goa. Welcome Kalesh here in our studios. It's very special day for all of us today to have a serving Navy officer in our studios here. साथियों, ये सारे सेशंस आप हमारे ncert.nic.in के वेबसाइट पर जाकर देख सकते हैं। आप अपने सुझाव हमें भेजते रहें, लगातार भेजते रहें अपने सुझाव। और मैं आपको एक बार फिर से याद दिलाता हूं कि पिछले सेशन में हमारे साथ सविनय नगेंद्र कैलिफोर्निया से जुड़े थे, जिन्होंने आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस के ऊपर बात की थी। हमने आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस के ऊपर 2021 में भी बात की, 2022 में भी बात की, लगातार बात करते आ रहे हैं। आज से अगला सेशन जो 26 सितंबर को होने वाला है, जिसके बारे में हम आपको आखिर में सत्र के आखिर में और विस्तार से बताएंगे, उसमें एक बार फिर से हम आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस के बारे में बात करेंगे, जबकि यदाटी नरहरी मेरे साथ बंगलौर से जुड़ेंगे और वो फार्मर्स के लिए किस तरह से आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस काम कर रहा है, किस तरह से प्रस्तावित है, उसके ऊपर बात करेंगे। साथियों, मैं अब आपके साथ इस आज के सेशन पर बात करूंगा जिसका कि टाइटल है, मेरे साथी हरप्रीत ने बताया, द रॉयल इंडियन नेवी एंड इंडियाज ट्रांजिशन टू इंडिपेंडेंस। हिंदी में कहूँ, रॉयल इंडियन नेवी और भारत की स्वतंत्रता। किस तरह से रॉयल इंडियन नेवी का ट्रांजिशन हुआ, ये कहानी शुरू होगी लगभग सन 1900 के आसपास, 20वीं शताब्दी के शुरू से और आज तक जाएगी। मेरे साथ कलेश मोहनन, कमांडर कलेश मोहनन मेरे साथ स्टूडियो में है। आज के प्रोग्राम में जितनी भी स्लाइड्स यूज़ होने वाली हैं साथियों, वो सभी या तो कमांडर कलेश मोहनन की अपनी स्लाइड्स हैं या इंडियन नेवी की अपनी स्लाइड्स हैं। आप इनको यूज़ कर सकते हैं बशर्ते कि आप अपना कर्टसी टू इंडियन नेवी ज़रूर दें और इस प्रोग्राम को भी अगर आप चिन्हित करें। साथियों, इससे पहले कि मैं सारा प्रोग्राम आगे कलेश मोहनन जी को दूं, मैं उनकी मुलाकात आपसे एक बार थोड़ा सा कराना चाहता हूं। कमांडर कलेश मोहनन, हु इज़ डॉक्टर also as well, is a commander in the Indian Navy as well as a naval historian. He is an alumnus of the Indian Navy Naval Academy, Kerala. He was previously head of the Department Military and Maritime History at the Indian Naval Academy 2015 and 16. He is a recipient of Junior Research Fellowship from the ICHR, Indian Council of Historical Research, Ministry of Human Resource Development, now Ministry of Education. Kalesh obtained his doctoral degree from the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He also continued his postdoctoral research program at JNU. He has several publications including that books Maritime Heritage of India, the cover page of which we are seeing on this slide, which is being flashed now, Maritime Heritage of India, the Royal Indian Navy, Trajectories, Transactions and the Transfer of Power. It has been published by the Rolls India in 2020. Another book, Breaking Waves Making History, Navika Sagar Parikrama 2025, very recent, and Maritime Heritage of Andaman and Nicobar Islands 2025, again published by Rolls London. Commander Kalesh Mohanan is presently the in charge of the Naval History Division of the Indian Navy. So, welcome Dr. Kalesh once again to our studios. Thank and it is our privilege. Now it is all yours.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Gagan Gupta and NCERT for giving this opportunity to interact with the new young minds of India. As of you, everyone knows that India is a maritime nation. We have the history of maritime from the Vedic period, even before that, from the Harappan civilization times. But there are so many histories, maritime histories. The Chola, the mighty Cholas. We have the Marathas, the Kunyalis. We have so many maritime histories. But these are all the regional maritime powers. But when this entire colonial powers came to India, the Portuguese, Dutch, French, finally the English. When the English East India Company was established in India, they felt a need for protecting their maritime trade for the protection of only for their commercial activity. They started a marine here, a form of a navy in 1612. I would say that was the beginning of a British Navy in India. Later it had transitioned to Indian Navy after independence. Now I will cover this, the transition from 1612 up to 1950, how a colonial navy played a major role in the world wars and later the Royal Indian Navy uprising of 1946, how it shaped and helped getting freedom from the colonial long, more than 4 decades of colonial power in India. Let us begin. In 1612, on 5th September 1612, the East India Company, the ships arrived in Surat. It's a very interesting to note that because all the colonial powers came to in India. They went to Surat to set up their factories. They set up later only for their production the British Crown officially, they have given the permission to start a navy in India. Now, one point I would like to bring out here, some pictures we used it here, this only for representational purpose, not the original ones. Some photographs are used here, that's from the original naval archives. From the 1612 up to 1934, the Indian Navy or the British Indian Navy has changed its names, titles multiple times. You have seen this here, the Imperial Colonial Navy, like the Portuguese, the French, Dutch and the British. Everyone, they were in a race for their control over the trade, maritime trade. Particularly that is for the spice trade. Later the British, they have the colonial aspirations that for controlling the land here. Yes, they were very successful in controlling the lands and later subsequently conquering the entire India. Let us see from 1612. There is a beginning, 5th September 1612. To the East India Company, the East India Company's marine was set up. Later in 1686, they made it as a non-combatant marine, that is a Bombay Marine. Later on 1st May 1830, they changed the Indian Navy. In 1858, again, Her Majesty's Indian Navy. Later, 1863, the Bombay Marine, they divided into two, that's the Bombay Marine and the Bengal Marine. One was based in Bombay, other one was based in Kolkata. In 1877, this name was changed to Her Majesty's Indian Marine, and later in Royal Indian Marine in 1892. Now, the role from Royal Indian Marine to Royal Indian Navy on 2nd October 1934. I will explain to you how the Navy in India played a major role in the two world wars and later the Indianization of the Indian Navy. The pre-war contributions, the Royal Indian Marine from 1892 to 1914. Basically, the tasks were given to the Royal Indian Marine, that was conducting marine surveys. Yes, because survey was one of the major tasks was given to the auxiliary force in India, basically conducting the surveys, making charts of the entire coast of India and including that's a island places like Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep. And the same time the Royal Indian Marine maintained the lighthouses that for the merchant vessels for their easy sea navigation. At the same time, the Marine in India that was utilized that for the troop transportation. It's not only the naval personnel, it was only that's for the army as well, for the British Indian Army. The naval vessels in India were used for transporting British Indian troops from one place to another place within India and from India to various places across the world. But its role was very limited. It was like almost a non-combatant navy in India. But when the war broke out, the First World War broke out in 1914, the British realized the importance for a navy in India that for protecting their colonial state as well as their mercantile activity in India. Immediately after the First World War, once this started in 1914, the Royal Indian Marine vessels were rearmed at two places. One is in Mumbai and second it was in Kidarpur in Kolkata. The vessels were rearmed, refitted and made it combatant to face the enemy in the First World War. Again, the Royal Indian Marine vessels were used for transporting of Indian Army troops, mules, camels, horses ammunition and food items to various theatres of wars. Not only that, but also the Royal Indian Navy vessels were utilized for various actions in Mesopotamia and East Africa. During this First World War, the British understood that there is a lot of manpower available in India that could be utilized for any future war. As all of you are aware, the Indian Congress also agreed for sparing Indians, that for utilizing the British Indian Army for fight in the First World War. The Royal Indian Marine played a major role that for protecting the trade in the Indian Ocean during the First World War. Though its role was very limited in the First World War, but it's played a major role that for protecting the British mercantile interest in the Indian Ocean. The First World War, again the Britain, it was going through a financial condition of they were not able to maintain a full navy in India. But the several committees were formed by the British Admiralty to look into the development of a navy in India. But because of the financial constraints, the British Admiralty decided to limit the development for a navy, the Royal Indian Marine in India. In 1920, Rear Admiral Mobay, he was posted in India as the director of the Royal Indian Marine, which was located in Mumbai, it's a headquarters. He submitted his report in 1921 for the full-fledged navy in India, anticipating a future war in the Indian Ocean. His experience with the First World War, he recommended that for a minimum of a 15 sloops navy in India. But again the British Admiralty, they rejected this proposal by stating that their economic interest has to be protected within the available resources, and the Royal Navy's force there based in Trincomalee. After this decision by the British Admiralty, Rear Admiral Mobay, he resigned and he went back to London. Because of financial conditions in India, they were taking the benefit of all the trade in India, but the British never wanted to finance for the development of a navy in India. Now, between 1921 and 1939, just before the Second World War, British Admiralty made multiple committees to look into the development of a navy in India. At the same time in India, the Indian National Congress and the freedom movement, the nationalist leaders, they started demand for the Indianization of the Indian Navy, the Navy in India. And it's very interesting to note that, like all colonial powers, the British also followed the martial race theory. As you are aware, the British Indian Army, if you look at there, they made several regiments based on this martial race, like a Gurkha regiment, Sikh regiment, Punjab regiment, Madras regiment. The similar way the British followed the martial race theory in inducting the ratings in India. Now you must be wondering what are the ratings. Now all of you are aware, there are sailors in the Navy. The sailors were known as the ratings. Till 1925, the 100% of the ratings in the Royal Indian Marine belongs to Islam. Because of this martial race theory and their induction were focused only on two places. That is northwestern frontier province. Now, currently we can say the Punjab, Afghanistan, Baluchistan, and from the Ratnagiri district of Maharashtra. The 100% of the ratings were Muslim. Because of the Indian leaders' pressure on the British government in India, finally the Royal Indian Marine decided to induct Indian officers as the King's commissioned officers. Sub-Lieutenant D.N. Mukherjee, he was commissioned in 1928. He was the first officer to be commissioned. There is a huge demand for Indianizing officers, but the British, they were very reluctant to give the King's commission. There are two types of commission. One is Viceroy's commission and second is the King's commission. Earlier they were used to give the Viceroy's commission to the Indian officers. They are not actually the officers. They are actually between the ratings and the officers. There are other group of people, officers, known as Viceroy's commissioned officers. Finally, in 1928, the British agreed to commission Indians as officers. Now the question of training, because those who are recruited as officers, they all were sent to the UK, that for their ab initio training and for their specializations. And later in 1930s, based on these reports, the British decided to develop a navy. The Rawlinson Committee report, the Chatfield Committee report, this all recommended that for a full-fledged navy in India, anticipating a future war here in India. But in the beginning of, just before the World War II, the Royal Indian Navy had only 8 ships. As per these recommendations, the British Admiralty decided to change the name from Royal Indian Marine to Royal Indian Navy on 2nd October 1934. The Rawlinson Committee report that recommended for a 15 ships and other small vessels navy in India. Finally, the British decided to go for another one committee, that is called as the Chatfield Committee or the Expert Committee. I'll tell you why it is known as the Expert Committee. It's very interesting to know that. Between 1921 to 1939, 9 committees were formed. And none of the Indians were part of that committees. When the Rawlinson Committee report came, the Indian political leaders demanded for the Indian to be as a member in the committee. Because the political leaders demand for the participation in the committee, the British decided to call it's a expert committee by stating that Indians, we don't have any expertise in the field of maritime matters. They want to avoid the Indian representation in the committee. So they start naming or calling this committee as an expert committee. The so-called expert committee, Chatfield Committee, submitted its report in 1939 that for the 3-stage development of a navy in India. Because every 5 years, the new ships will be inducted, the number of officers and sailors will be increased by stage. That's for the long-term perspective plan. Basically, a full-fledged compact navy in India, that for the interest of the colonial mercantile activities in India. Is not for the protection of India as it is, not for the people in India, that for the British economic interest. Unexpectedly, the World War II, the Second World War, started in 1939. The war broke out. The British could not implement any of these recommendations of the committees. Now what to do? The Indian subcontinent had to play a major role, that's in the Second World War. The British realized the threat that is from the Japanese. They wanted to protect the mercantile activities and the colonial land in India. The British Admiralty and the British government decided to go for a full-fledged development in India, that for the Royal Indian Navy, and increase the number of manpower. When the war broke out, we hardly had nearly 150 officers and nearly 1500 ratings and 8 ships, including 1 survey vessel. That was the total strength of a navy in India. The massive naval expansion happened, including smaller vessels. They occurred from UK, Australia and the US. They placed in the Indian waters. Subsequently to manning these all vessels, they wanted to go for the expansion of the navy as the manpower. Now, the manpower basically, earlier it was totally controlled by the Indian Army. The question arises now, how to manage? Because any armed forces, there are certain education, physical and medical conditions are there. All of you are aware. But now, 90% of the manpower recruited by the Indian Army were selected for the Indian Army. Only nearly 2 to 3% of the recruited people were given to the Royal Indian Navy. Now the second question of the martial race theory. The British started thinking of should they continue with the martial race theory or leave the martial race theory and recruit manpower that for the wartime requirement. Yes, they have to leave it. Now they started inducting people from across India. Earlier I told you, because the entire manpower recruitment that was based in northwestern frontier province and Ratnagiri district of Maharashtra. Now they start inducting people from all over India. Many of the people they have never seen any sea in their life. The British had to compromise in the physical, medical and educational standards. For getting more manpower, they start giving lot of advertisements, false promises, and given a very, very rosy picture about the service. So many advertisements during the wartime. It's only for meeting their wartime requirement. The war started. Now they have to protect the Indian waters and their maritime trade interest. The initial strength of nearly 1700 with 8 vessels. After start inducting people, the strength rose to nearly 25,000 by 1945 when the war got over. Yes, not only the ratings, but also the British started inducting Indian officers. You can say this is a real photo of the Royal Indian Navy, new entry camp the new young 16 to 18 years old, young boys are joining the Royal Indian Navy with a lot of expectations. Because they were given a very false picture about the Royal Indian Navy. Good service, good food, good salary package, good perks, and false promises on post-war settlement. They all were promised that they will be given promised jobs after the war. Or let's see how it will transition. Thus, I told you now they have to leave this martial race theory. Now, people start coming from different places. Now, you have to understand the early 20th century social and caste-based situation was prevalent in India. Within the ratings itself, there are so many issues. Social issues, caste and community issues. Many upper caste sailors, they had problems with interact with or work with a lower caste. And racial, on top of it, there was a racial discrimination by the British. The discrimination between the white and the blacks. The British treated the Indian ratings as a secondary class citizen. This lot of issues, it was very much existed during the course of the war, and this also led to the mutiny of 1946. Now, let us see, because not only the recruitment, at the same time, the British wanted to expand its training and specialization courses in India. They made during this time to meet the war requirement. The Royal Indian Navy decided to start multiple training centers at various places. Now, you have to note one thing. 4 new training establishments, they were set up there in Lahore and Karachi. HMS Akbar, HMS Himalaya, HMS Chamak, this all training establishments, they are set up there in Lahore and Karachi. This I will explain to you later how it affected India in the partition. The new establishments, store establishments, dockyards, and new communication places were established that for having a very established communication centers. By the peak of the Second World War, when the Japanese attacked in Burma and the Andamans, they are very much sure about that there will be an attack by the Japanese in India. So the British start focusing on the rearming or making more ships in India, that for protecting their trade interest and for the naval assets in India. Now, I told you from 1939 to 1945, the number of ratings increased from 1500 to nearly 25,000. Now, when the war got over in 1945, the British actually, they were going through another financial crisis. What to do with this force? The British Admiralty decided to demobilize the ratings. But now the question, what are their promises they had given before their induction during the course of the war? Nearly around 20,000 people had to be re-employed, demobilized. British had decided to just leave them like that. Massive people were moved to Mumbai, HMAS Talwar, and Castle Barracks there in Bombay, then it's called Bombay. That for the demobilization, for the completing their all the formalities just before retirement from the Navy. These all factors, they were actually growing as a fire within the ratings. One side, the freedom movement, it was going on. The Quit India movement, the World War, they have gone to various theatres of wars and places, and they have seen the life of the people in other countries. The growing nationalist feeling and the freedom movement and the racial discrimination, not only racial discrimination, the discrimination pay, perks, allowance within the Navy. If you look at their salary package, the Indians used to get almost half of the salary of their counterparts of the British. Their accommodation, the standard of living, standard of food compared to the British were lower. On top of the discrimination by the British officers towards the Indians. This all fire, it was happening within the Indians. Now the question of the RIN mutiny of 1946. Why it is a mutiny? So generally it's a term of mutiny, everyone it's easy to call mutiny. What was the origin of the term mutiny? The British started calling the mutiny by any representation, any protest by more than one person against any existing system, particularly that's in the military. They term it as mutiny. If you look at the Oxford Encyclopedia, it says the same. Any representation or a protest against any power, that can be termed as a mutiny. Now the question, whether it was a mutiny, it's a revolt or a strike or an uprising. As I told you, this whole harsh conditions existed there in the Royal Indian Navy. Now, from November 1945, there are some protests start happening within the Navy against the British, anti-British slogans. In end of November 1945, one of the ratings of the Royal Indian Navy, he sent his resignation letter to the commanding officer. That was treated as against the colonial power. So he was sent to the jail. But by early 1946, from the mid of Jan or early February 1946, there are so many anti-British slogans was written on the walls of HMAS Talwar. That is a base, a depot ship, it was a unit, and in Castle Barracks. By 6th of February 1946, Commander King, he was the commanding officer of HMAS Talwar. When he was moving inside the base, he found the ratings who are expecting their demobilization, not giving the mark of respect. This is based on the RIN inquiry report. According to Commander King, the ratings, they hadn't given the mark of respect to the commanding officer. He started using foul language on the Indians, coolies, junglis. But the very next day, a group of 14 Indian ratings, they have given their formal complaint and to Lieutenant Commander Shaw. He was the second in command. Generally, it is known as the executive officer of the base. The complaint is against the commanding officer for using derogatory language. But the commanding officer, he hasn't taken any action. Finally, on 16th of February, the commanding officer decided to discard this complaint. He said no action. The Indians are making false statements. Now again, the anti-British slogans were written at various places. In between, one of the sailors is known called BC Dutt. He was put behind the bars for writing anti-British slogans. British go back. On 17th February 1946 morning, the Indian ratings found that the breakfast was given to them that was not in a eatable condition. They raised the complaint, but in the very next day morning, 18th February, that was the starting of a new chapter of the history of India. 18th February 1946, the Indian ratings, they again found the breakfast that was not up to the standard. They start raising the slogans: no food, no job. The hunger strike. The hunger strike started on the early morning of 18 February 1946. All of a sudden, this news spread out all over the Navy, not only limited to Bombay. By the afternoon of 18 February 1946, RIN on strike. The news spread to Karachi, Lahore, Madras, Kolkata, all the places, and many of the ships at sea. Everyone, most of these Indian ratings felt the same. Yes, the racial discrimination and our future. Actually, we were cheated by the British. Most of the ships and people, the ratings, they started the hunger strikes at various places. On 21st February 1946, Bombay, the entire public, they called for a general strike. At the same time, on 21st and 22nd, a general strike happened in Lahore and Karachi in support of the Royal Indian Navy ratings. The Royal Indian Navy ratings formed a committee, RIN Strike Committee. They formed the president and the vice president. And they were expected to get the support from the Indian political leaders. This is a real photo. You can see it here, the real photo from the RIN uprising. I would call it as uprising. It's in the Bombay. The people start supporting, the general public support their movement. They formed this RIN Strike Committee, and they demanded the support from the Congress as well as from the Communist Party of India. They approached Aruna Asaf Ali. She was the Communist Party of India leader, and they wanted to get the support from the Congress as well. But later, the senior officials of the Royal Indian Navy met the strike committee. But the strike committee, they demanded for the release of the sailors. They were behind the bars, and no victimization of this RIN uprising participants. Not only that, they demanded many political demands. Fast trial and leaving this INA, Indian National Army people, withdrawal of the Indian forces from other places, and same pay per excellence service conditions. They demanded for it. Here you have to note, interestingly note one thing. During the strike, the Arraign Uprising Committee, they removed the British Indian flag and hosted 3 flags together: the Indian National Congress, Muslim League and Communist Party of India's flags. See, because in the 1945s, the political leaders, they were demanding the division of India based on the religion. Now look at here, the Hindus and the Muslims, they are together, they are fighting against the British, they are demanding. But finally, Aruna Asaf Ali and Patel, they promised to the Naval Uprising Committee that there will not be any victimization. Please stop the revolt or this uprising against the existing British government. Believing these political leaders, they withdraw from their uprising against the British. But it's become a very crucial turning point. How? Because during the course of the war from 1939 to 45, there were 9 mutinies, the so-called mutinies in the Royal Indian Navy. And just 1 month prior to this Royal Indian Navy uprising, there was a huge mutiny in the Indian Army. But they suppressed. The matter came to the records or to the media. And there were 3 mutinies there in the Indian Air Force between 1945 to 1942 to 45. After this, in 1946, after the mutiny, in May 1946, the military intelligence in India, they sent a top secret report to the British Admiralty and the British Parliament stating Indian armed forces cannot be trustworthy. If you look at here, any colonial power, their backbone is the armed forces. Now they are losing the trust, or they cannot be, the forces in India cannot be trusted further. Because of the indirect impact of this RIN uprising, the British Parliament decided to leave India. But this story, it's hardly spoken in India by the historians. But it's in these all records are available there in the British archives. And Prime Minister Attlee, in his correspondence from Prime Minister's office to the British Admiralty, stating that yes, Britain has to leave India. Based on this, the British started the 3rd June plan. Accordingly, India became independent on 15th August 1947. And the Indian Navy, yes, the country got divided. Similar way, India also divided into 2. 60 versus 40 ratio, Indian Navy was divided. Yes, the people were given the choice of opting for India and Pakistan. Now I'll conclude with one thing, because you have seen in 1925, as I told you, this entire ratings, they were Muslim. And because of the martial race theory, the entire recruitment was based or focused on the northwestern frontier province. And most of these are training establishments. It was there in Lahore and Karachi. The Royal Indian Navy, upon becoming independent, we have lost the most of the training schools and the trained, experienced senior sailors. That was the reason India had to depend upon the Britain for the next maybe 10 years. The Royal Indian Navy became Indian Navy on 26 Jan 1950, but India had to continue with the British officers in India. In 1958, R.T. Kadari, he became the first Indian chief of the naval staff. So for the next from 1947 to 58, we had foreign officers. Now you see the transition from 1612 to 1950. How the Navy, the Royal Indian Navy uprising, how to help getting freedom from the colonial power. Thank you so much for your patience. I am concluding here. Thank you all. Jai Hind. And
Thank you very much, Commander Kalesh Mohanan. It was mesmerizing listening to you. Thank you very much for being here. We are receiving some questions. If you permit us, then can we take on this discussion
yes, sir.
ahead?
Sir.
सबसे पहले तो आपने हिस्ट्री से बात की, 1652 से बात की. मैं थोड़ा और पीछे ले जाता हूँ. आपने 1612 में बात की कि सूरत में आए सबसे पहले. वास्को डी गामा तो भाई कोचीन में सबसे पहले उधर केरला के पहुँचे थे. तो ऐसा क्या हुआ कि वो मतलब क्या ट्रांजिशन था, क्या अंतर था कि वास्को डी गामा तो केरल के कोस्ट पर आए और ये सूरत में आए, जो कि थोड़ा सा मतलब अंदर है, मेनलैंड में है, हालांकि कोस्ट थोड़ा दूर है, लेकिन क्या रीजन है उसका जोग्राफिकली?
Sir, the Portuguese, they were the first one to come to India, that for the trade, because before that the entire trade, the Malabar spice trade monopoly, it was with Arabs.
Okay.
Then the Portuguese, they decided to come to India, that for having a direct trade. So they have come to India with the support of an Gujarati navigator, that from the East Africa, they have come to Malabar coast, they set up, and later they set up their hubs there in Cochin, later in Goa, and subsequently they moved to Surat also for having their maritime hub there.
So this is all economics about
it's
it.
It's all economics.
Economy, which is prevailing even today.
Even now, it's a maritime
today. Yes, you are right. There is a slightly different question.
Sir.
Now, which I am receiving from my colleagues. I will take it on like this. See, which is a rather recent one, not from the history of the Navy. You mentioned about the ships, etc. There has been a tradition that the old ships are being, if they are replaced with the same title.
Yes, sir.
Number one. Number two, these are always, to my understanding, always sailed by a woman. All the ships
sir,
are called by the woman.
Also, but here we call it as yes.
Yes. And then slightly related to it, what happens to those earlier ships? For example, Indian Navy had given its old Godavari ship for the testing of BrahMos missile. So are these all old ships remain in the dockyard for some testing purposes, or they are dismantled?
Also multi-purpose. Like this, we as a first responder in the Indian Ocean region.
Yes.
And we have the other country. We support training into the other friendly foreign countries, and we have given our ships to other countries as well as a gift. It's a goodwill gesture. We have given ships to Sri Lanka, Maldives, Mauritius. We have given we gifted ships.
So they are being refurbished?
Yes, sir, refitted, and we have given this. At the same time, we
as a Vikrant we got.
So Vikrant, after decommissioning, yes, that we used it for some time, made it as a museum, and later subsequently we sold it.
Okay.
And because we can know it's a very difficult to maintain a huge aircraft carrier.
All right.
And some ships, yes, we use it for the test firing.
That's great. That's great. Harpreet, you have some questions?
Yes,
so
sir, I have one question. So these days we are seeing that women, they hold really powerful positions in defense forces. What kind of lucrative career opportunities are there for women aspirants in Navy?
Same as me, ma'am. It's everybody is equal in the armed forces. There is no disparity.
Okay. And what about the modernization of Indian Navy? Because with time, technology is being upgraded. We are talking about AI. So, is there something happening in Indian Navy with regards to technology upgradation also?
Yes, ma'am. Every service has to adopt the new technologies. Yes.
Okay. Great. And sir, also I heard that, in the olden times, we used to follow this cadre nomenclature in Navy. Like there was promotion or a transfer due to camp system. Is it still happening in the Navy now, or things have
Sorry,
changed?
I didn't get
Is
you.
some kind of lateral entry system?
No, so this question is pertinent to when we see Navy in contrast with Air Force or with Indian Army. So the cadre system, which we have, the post system, is somewhat different in Indian Navy.
So because all rank system, rank, everything is the same in the all armed forces.
Okay.
The same.
Others all are the same. So how they, I mean, can somebody enter into the Indian Navy at a lateral position, say at a commander or a captain, or,
No,
or
sir.
the one has to come through the
Yes,
camp
sir.
system,
It's all,
or through the Indian Naval College?
So for the
NDA?
students' knowledge, I would say there are two types of entry. One is for the officer entry, and the other one is the sailor entry. For the sailor, after +2, yes, with a certain percentage, this all details are there in the Indian Navy website.
Yes.
It's everything online. They can apply through the Indian Navy, join the Indian Navy.com. That's the website. They can apply for it. And second, for the officer, there is a two types of entries. One is after +2, it's a National Defence Academy and Naval Academy, and they will spend 4 years at the academy. That's they will be doing BTech, and absolutely they will be commissioned after 4 years of training at National Defence Academy as well as at the Indian Naval Academy. And second, direct entry after BTech or MSc Maths, Physics, Chemistry and History and English. They can directly join. They'll be joining through direct entry, and they will spend 1 year training at the Indian Naval Academy, because all officers they join as a sub-lieutenant and subsequently they grow to the rank of Chief of the Naval Staff in the executive cadre.
Yes, you took the name of Chief of the Naval Staff. I will share another thing. Just a second. You had been at Andaman and Nicobar.
Yes, sir.
And that place, you talked about the Japanese invasion,
Yes, sir.
etc. We still see the bunkers,
Yes, sir.
particularly in the Ross Island
Ross
area,
Island, yes.
Ross Island area, and in some other islands as well. I mean, but those appear to be not so thick built. They appear as if they are just to save themselves from the bullets. Can you tell us something more about those bunkers also? The role of those bunkers at
So
that
the
time?
bunkers, that's for them, as you said, that is for protecting themselves. That is from the attack. It is something is very interestingly historically. If you see, there is a queue of Nankauri. It's a when you see the maritime history of India, it's a very interesting. When the Japanese they were approaching to the Andamans, the queen of Nankauri, she asked the people to hoist a British flag there. From the distance, after seeing the British flag there, the Japanese, they thought it has been already occupied by the British. So, two ways of looking at it. Nankauri, the queen, the people there in the Nankauri island, they saved themselves from the attack from the Japanese. And second, the Japanese decided to go back.
Oh, so that is the history of those bunkers in short. Now the Ross Island has been renamed as, what's the new name of the Ross Island, sir? This is the question.
So recently,
Okay, anyway. I mean, many of the islands have been renamed in the name of. So now, friends, probably Harpreet,
Yes,
we
did not have enough time. So we have to wrap up. Yes, but not before knowing, sir, what's coming next.
साथियों, आज हमने रॉयल इंडियन नेवी की बात सुनी, रॉयल इंडियन नेवी के ट्रांजिशन सुने, इंडियन नेवी के क्या क्या रूप रहे, क्या क्या नाम रहे, किस तरह से उसका संस्कार, उसका स्ट्रक्चर बदलता रहा, इन सब पर हमने बात सुनी। बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग आज का सेशन रहा। आज हमें थोड़ा सा अतीत के झरोखे से हमने बात की। मुझे अभी मेरे साथी कलेश जी ने बात की, चीफ ऑफ नेवल स्टाफ। फ्यू डेज बैक we happened to meet the Admiral Dinesh Kumar Tripathi Sahab, who is the chief of the naval staff nowadays. He said that we should do some sessions on maritime lines, maritime systems. Yes, India has a huge long maritime coastline, nearly 7,500 kilometers or so. Am I right,
yes,
Kalesh? Yes. So we will be doing a session on maritime coastline as well very soon. But next, on 26th of September, as I said in the beginning, that we are going to have a session on artificial intelligence for the farmers. Yadati Narhari from Indian Institute of Science will be with us from Bangalore, and he will be talking about empowering India's farmers with artificial intelligence, AI. So, be with us on next Friday, 26th of September 2025 at the same time, 10 o'clock at the same studio. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I would also like to thank both our guests. Thank you so much, sir, once again,
ma'am.
both of you,
Thank
for
you.
your
Thank you so
contribution
much.
to the session.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure hosting this session. And now, since you know what's coming next, well, let's prepare for that. For that, we have to take leave of you also, but not before telling you the schedule. So, we're through with the session of this wonderful webinar series, Listening to Learn. In a short while from now, you can watch a session on Hindi, which will be on inclusive classrooms. 12:40 to 1:40, we will bring you a session on Indian Sign Language. 2 p.m. we will bring you a session of Urdu, followed by a session of Science. 3 is the time for the session of Social Science, followed by a session of Mathematics. And simultaneously, you can watch a session Mano Darpan Paricharcha also. From 4 to 5 p.m., you can watch our online training program. This time, we are talking about instructional designs. And 5 p.m., we will bring you session Sahyog. We will end the day with a session on school leadership development at 5:30. With this as a wrap, this is me, Harpreet Kaur, taking leave of you, and will join you soon. Namaskar.